Vasvik Award for Science and Technology in 2020. As a successful entrepreneur, she had her second instinct at entrepreneurship, a clinical diagnostic venture, Diti Omics Technologies Private Limited in the year 2014. This provides molecular diagnostic services, leveraging of some of the most experienced researchers and experts in the field of genomics, healthcare, and technology. Now, I request Dr. Sudha Rao ma'am to kindly deliver her talk on careers, entrepreneurship in STEM for students of life sciences. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be in a hall full of women and men who joined them to celebrate. Thank you, Dr. Anu, for inviting me for this event. I see you're all students with aspirations in life sciences. I'll share snippets of my journey from when I was a student like you to where I am today. And I hope that will be some inspiration for what you could potentially achieve in your lives. So, just as symbolic to Women's Day, I lead this company called Genotypic. It's one of the first genomics companies in India. I don't know how many of you have heard of the word genomics. Raise your hands, please. Genomics. Okay, that's not bad. Genomics is basically the study of DNA and RNA in a we started this company in 98. I'll also tell you the story of how we started it. But as we stand today, we are about 60 people, if we between 60 and 80 people at various times. And what is remarkable is that this domain is so gender non-specific that our group leaders, we have several departments, are led by women who have very high levels of education, degrees, have been abroad, come back and lead several groups in the organization. So I think biotech is one space where really women have excelled due to various reasons, not because men don't want to be here, but it is inherently that we have potentially allied capabilities and strengths that allow us to sort of excel in this domain. So I basically studied in Mysore, a laid-back city, a city, royal city as you call it. I did my master's there, and as I was doing my master's in the Department of Botany, there was one subject that really kindled my interest. So I used to have interest in genetics, but also there was this very small, chapter on what was called as molecular biology. Remember, this was, early 90s, 89, 90. And somehow I was determined that that is what I want to study. And there were just a handful of schools in India that were doing, molecular biology. Molecular biology is looking at molecules, right? Largely DNA and RNA. So I did my, that's when I think that was the second year that they had this national entrance test for PhD scholarships. And there were no guides, there were no schools which taught you how you should study. And it was actually an exam that looked at your basic understanding of science, which means one was being assessed for what one learned in 11th and 12th, right? Your physics, chemistry, biology. And somehow, I think, since I was determined, I prepped myself all on my own, and I think it so happened I was the only student from the entire university who qualified. So that was a real turning point, because once I had this fellowship, I had the freedom to choose which lab I could do my PhD in. So lesson one is that for anyone with dreams and aspirations, how you choose your path, every step that you take, every opportunity that you see, is a stepping stone to success. Right? It was not something very big. It's not that somebody else could not have done what one did, but essentially your own confidence, your determination to reach your goal, I think, is very important, especially for youngsters. And like many of you, I'm sure many people who come to life sciences would have had an aspiration for joining medicine or medical school. There's this very glorified view of being a doctor and treating patients. And I was one such student, right? Didn't make it to medical school, but somehow my path or every step that I took essentially has now led me to be able to do that without having a medical degree. I'll tell you how I did that. Madurai Kamaraj University was one of the top schools at that time, had a very, very vibrant research setup, right? Even master students used to get involved in research. So two or three things that I learned doing my PhD there was there was no compromise to rigor. Whatever you do it very, very deeply. You must have a deep understanding of what you do, right? Even the smallest of topic, simplest of things that you do, please understand it thoroughly. So even things, very small things that many of you now may not even know. You use extraction kits. I don't know how many of you have done PCR as part of your course. So there is a step where you do extraction of what's called as a plasmid. Right now, everybody uses kits. When we were doing PhDs, we were actually taught different methods. What is the biochemistry? Why does chromosome have to circularize? How do you separate out the proteins from the fat and the nucleic acid? What forms does the plasmid take? So it might seem like a very simple plasmid extraction. What does it matter how you do it? It's your learning, right? It is essentially a practice for your future. Whatever you do it with rigor, right? Very, very deep, go deep, understand at a very, very deep level, and be an expert. Very important. That is when you will excel. So my PhD was in biotechnology. So my topic was on genetic engineering. It was very, very, very glamorous to be in the department of genetic engineering because, people who were using restriction enzymes. And I had this very fancy idea of, doing good science in the environmental, with environmental impact. So my PhD was on generating microbes. So there was this thing called Bacillus macilens, right, which was a nitrogen-fixing bacterium. So can I make this do much more than what it can? So the lab I worked in specialized in bacillus called Bacillus thuringiensis, right? This is what you see as BT cotton, BT GM crops. All of them rely on the crystal toxin protein. So the topic was to put these genes into the Bacillus macilens. So then you have this superbug which can both fix nitrogen, be a nutrient, as well as be a pesticide, biopesticide. Of course, proved it on the bench. There were interests to patent it. Didn't happen. So please remember the journey. I did a master's in botany, specialized in taxonomy and genetics, and then went on to genetic engineering, slightly disconnected, looking at microbes. Then I always had a fascination for the workings of the human brain. Right, so there was an opportunity that obviously PhD in Madurai Kamaraj meant that most, if not all, went for further studies or postdoctoral research either to the US or Europe. And I followed suit as well with for my PhD and postdoctoral research at Cornell Medical School. And there my topic was, I was actually looking at the workings of the brain, right? So what forms the molecular basis of memory was the question that we were asking. And this was a group led by a clinician, right? They have in the US something called as an MD PhD program, where clinicians actually not only practice with patients, but they also do it very almost full time. So Dr. Goldman, Stephen Goldman used to do full-time research during the day and consult patients in the evening. So he basically had a 24-hour career and apart from a large family. So learnings from there were, so I was the single molecular biologist in an entire lab, clinicians, cell biologists. So there was a lot of responsibility on whatever I did because I had to do it on my own. So that gave some level of independence, right? Independence and confidence to do something and feel rewarded because what you do is contributing. You're the single contributor to that domain of expertise. So this was another opportunity that essentially carved the path for future. And at that time, I met Dr. Raja, who was also in the ICON National Lab. And my PhD, while it was all very glamorous to be doing this genetic engineering, the enzymes we were using routinely in the lab, you order something today, it comes after 6 months. Customs clearance, importing was a huge process and very expensive. Not every lab could afford it. So by the time the enzyme comes, your PhD topic has changed. Right? So what one realized was biological research is to some extent a slave of access to technologies. So that was the limitation we had faced as students in India, right? So in 2000, once I had finished my postdoctoral research with a good publication in Neuron, and then moved on to Israel, which is called as a startup country, right? So that was the next stage of learning. Israel is a country which is very small, smaller than our state of Karnataka. But its contribution to the world, to science, is somewhere in the top 10, right? So very disproportionate to its population and its size. How do they achieve it? I think one of the biggest things that drives that country as a startup country are two things. One is adversity, right? So they're a country that was formed in 67, right? All Jews from all over the world came. So there is this very intense desire to protect its borders and also excel because you're trying to carve an identity for yourself. And two is that they pay very little heed to titles, degrees, or whatever, right? There is, I would say, to the extent of disregard. So you have an idea. It doesn't matter if you're just a BSc student, go ahead and test. In fact, we had a collaboration with a US Israeli company that had this student who had just finished his BSc, but very successfully developed assays for the qualitative traits in plants. These are called QTLs, and looking at resistance to various pests in chilies and tomatoes. And very, very confidently, he just developed this. It became a business idea. It became a company, and he was selling it all over the world. So the learning from Israel was, if you have an idea and a conviction, it may be the simplest, but how do you transform that idea into utility, into a product? How do you make it happen? How do you sell? Right? So that was the learning that we had in Israel, and gave a lot of confidence that we should be doing something like this back in India. So we came back in 2000, Dr. Raja and I, and we had a shared vision for what we wanted to do in our career. So when we came back to India, we had two options. One was either go the academic way, right? So take a faculty position in a university or in a research institution. The other option, of course, was to do something independently. While being independent seems very nice and good, you're your own master, but it comes with its bag of challenges, right? So there were years of struggle because we were in a domain that nobody knew. So the first thing we had to do was marketing. Please remember, we were scientists, right? We don't know what marketing is. Scientists are supposed to be sitting on the bench and doing work. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to learn so many more things than just science. So that was another journey. We were blessed with having collaborators and friends and family who had specialized in various domains, giving us advice. I learned what an invoice was only after 2 years of running the business, right? So I couldn't distinguish between a receipt and a bill and an invoice. So entrepreneurship as a journey was very, very different from all of the years of training. And what it challenged most was one's resilience. There are moments when you think it's all over, right? There's no more money in the bank to pay salaries. There's no money in the bank to do the next project. But you have to survive. You have invested in an idea. So it taught us that 2 or 3 important things. One is that you need to be super confident about and have conviction about what you want to do. But the flip side is you cannot be dogmatic. You should be brave enough to drop something and understand early enough that it could potentially is a failed idea, right? So you must have both humility and confidence. Having just one is not enough because then you would just be going like a gadi without brakes, right? And you're doomed to have an accident. So entrepreneurship taught resilience, humility, and super confidence. And most importantly, the power of networking. For any company to be successful, it is the people, right? People, your employees, your collaborators, your clients, your network, those are the wealth. And there is a lot of respect for other human beings, understanding their capabilities and how do you work together. So these were all learnings, and I've been fortunate that I grew up in a family. We were all sisters. I had no brothers, and the 2 things that the father somehow instilled in us, without saying it so much, but somewhere I don't know how, but 2 things that were very strong as values was that education, right, accomplishment, and independence are very, very important, whether you're a boy or a girl, right? There was no distinction there. And that was, I think, somehow the motivation to be where I am today. And apart from family support, friends, I've been fortunate to have these. But I also think sometimes that fortune or misfortune is as we see, right? You need to ignore, there is no life on earth that has not faced, whatever, misfortune or bad events. It happens to every one of us. It is essentially up to us how we see an opportunity in everything that is a failure and have a very, very strong positive frame of mind and move on. You must be really open, open your eyes to every opportunity that comes your way. And so from where I started as an MSc in botany, I then finally ended up with, this company called Dithiomics. Dithiomics is, Dithi means in Sanskrit insight, right? So for all the 22 years that we had Genotypic, we were the first company that started this, so we had to train people, and it was a wonderful journey of working with scientists, doing and loving the science we do, and at the same time having the freedom of being an entrepreneur and building an organization and contributing. We've also contributed significantly to the recent pandemic. Maybe one of the few companies that were recognized by the government of India to do sequencing for coronavirus, right? So without sequencing, you wouldn't have had vaccines, right? Because the moment Wuhan identified the virus as a potential threat, they sequenced it. And with that came the mRNA vaccines, right? And understanding of how the virus behaves. So at Genotypic, we've done so many publications, so many research projects, and contributed to both improvement of, in the microbiology space, in agriculture, in healthcare, clinical research projects. And the culmination of it in 2014 was the next plunge into a second round of entrepreneurship, and I started Dithiomics, which is basically a clinical diagnostics company. So we look at genetic disorders, you know, diagnosis of them. Why it is challenging is because Anybody knows how big the human genome is? How many bases? One raised hand. Okay, so our DNA, right? Every cell in our body has two copies, one coming from father, one from the mother, and 23 pairs of chromosomes, and these are all strung together, 3 billion bases in different sequences, and they code for proteins. So we have about 25,000 proteins that make all of us, right? And if you just look back and see each one of us looks very different, you can tell who's who, right? Because we're not the same. All our DNA has the same proteins. What makes this difference? So the difference is what we call as either SNPs, variations. And when those variations become harmful, they're called as mutations. So when something goes wrong, even one small base change sometimes can inflict upon you severe disease. For example, there's something called as osteogenesis imperfecta, where your bones just break apart from the time you're born just because there's one small mutation in a gene called W8. So the standard methods of diagnosis, which are essentially radiology, biochemistry, microbiology, cannot answer or cannot diagnose many of these disorders, and that's where we apply genomics, right? We sequence all of the important genes and are able to identify mutations. So when you do this, how does it help? It helps people get a diagnosis. Very often, people go from doctor to doctor. I've known cases where it has taken them almost 7 years just to get a diagnosis. And there are patients whose diseases cannot be treated. But if parents are carriers, if we are able to diagnose, then they can take decisions on the next baby. They could even potentially, by IVF, have a healthy baby. And of course, as new medicines come, diagnosis helps us to design new drugs. So all the way from botany back to healthcare, right? Contributing to human health has been the journey so far. And through that, I think all the lessons learned, all the way from schooling to college, to PhD, to postdoctoral research, even stepping out of the country, coming back, being an entrepreneur. Each phase of the life has contributed to so many learnings. And today, as I stand, it's a culmination of all of these and all the people that have been with me. And I'm sure each one of you here has an exciting journey ahead, right? And you all have ambitions, either entrepreneurial ambitions. I don't know how many of you want to be an entrepreneur. Anyone here who wants to start something of their own? That's a large percentage. Nice to see that. I mean, there are so many domains now. What do you do with, I think this is one college, as I visited all your labs, it's really remarkable the options that you have even for your undergrad and master's courses. I did not even hear of those terms when I was doing my courses, right? So this is a wonderful place, and you have opportunities all the way from starting from basic molecular biology to clinical research to agriculture, improving breeds, local breeds. When we did genomics in our lab, most of the technologies available were for plant and crops that the West was doing, like wheat or at best rice. And we actually developed arrays for almost 2,000 different plant species in India. So there is a significant opportunity within India as a space in the biotech space. So clinical research, food processing. Many have developed careers in baking, right? So the domains of forensic sciences, and now people even talk about DNA as a storage material, because please remember, it is so beautifully coded for what a human being should develop into, right? It's a program that we have in our DNA. So companies like Google have actually used this concept to explore DNA as the next storage material beyond chips that are seen in computers. So that's another very, very hot developing field. And there is artificial intelligence where you will probably replace routine work with computers or robots, and then human beings will then be allowed to do more creative and more challenging things. Like, for example, one of the work that was done at Arvind Eye Hospital with Google was to diagnose retinoblastoma, right? So you look at pictures, and image analytics could diagnose far earlier than doctors could with looking at the same image. So which means they're actually doing better than humans in certain areas. In certain areas, of course, human beings will contribute significantly to our understanding of what can be done. So if any of you were to choose genomics, right, your career path is really going to be extremely exciting, because this is enabling so many things, all the way from pharma companies. For example, AstraZeneca last year or a couple of years ago started this $10 billion program, right, to sequence the human genome, to understand what our genes are made of, how do I develop drugs. Starting from there to like work like what Diti is doing, diagnosing diseases, to understanding genes, opportunities are enormous. So choose your path carefully. Look at every opportunity that comes your way. Be positive and confident. One of the strengths women have is collaborative working, right? This has been demonstrated across a whole plethora of industries where women leaders excel in how they work. Even, for example, microfinancing, they've found that more than 90% of women who are being financed manage to return the loans that have been given to them versus 50% when you look at the general population. So women have a lot of strength. Use them, leverage them, and you're all set to make a fantastic career for yourselves. Thank you, and I welcome questions if any of you have. Also, as a small note, we do take students for internships, and if anyone is interested in genomics, we have the 6-month internship that they can do at Genotypic on a project. So if any of you are interested, I'm sure you can go through your university to come and do your work at Genotypic.
How many students?
So typically we take about 4 to 6 students, and one would have to just write an abstract on why they want to do the internship at Genotypic. That's it. Yeah, they can come. Thank you, everyone, and all the best.
Thank you, Dr. Sudha, for her wonderful talk. It is rather an experience which is shared with us. A woman starting with MSc Botany and ending up in gene sequencing and talking about diagnostics and clinical research is really wonderful, which we don't think. Generally, as soon as she would have started genomics, some 10% of you would have thought that not related to us, shut off your brains. That's what happens in any talk. But I really liked the way she took her into the journey of how she has attained this. It is not a joke. Not only for women, even for men too. Starting your own company and standing in that, and that too in an area, niche area, which no one knows. Now everybody talks about PCR, but when they started the company, PCR, nobody knows about it. But I think most of you have seen, how many of you have seen Jurassic Park? That movie is being picturized before PCR is being completely done. See the vision of the people, that's when everything in a small tiny molecule DNA, your behavior today, in past, in future, it is determining what you are, and we are decoding it, still struggling to decode. In a record time, we were to get the vaccinations. Third wave could not able to do anything, not much to, especially to Indians. That is not because we are resistant, we are immune. It is mostly because of the vaccines. How did they come? It is not the passive behavior. It is very, very active behavior of people like Dr. Sudha. Within 1 month, complete sequence is there on the net. You can see anything, anything, everything about COVID-19. That was a scientific development. I really appreciate, and on behalf of all the women and on the behalf of scientific community, I want to give a big round of applause to all who worked hard. Tough fight, very tough fight to the nature and COVID-19. We almost succeeded. We are coming to the end of pandemic, but don't let your guards down. It is there on. But I feel like take this opportunity to thank Dr. Sudha once again, and also all of you. I know how tough it is to sit after lunch for a talk, but you made it. I congratulate all of you for this particular thing. And also I thank all my fellow colleagues. There are teachers from the group who represented their institutions and had a small get together here. I wish you a wonderful Women's Day. Happy Women's Day to all of you. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Principal Mann, for that wonderful words. Thank you, Dr. Sudha ma'am, for delivering an effective talk and giving us insights on the careers and entrepreneurship opportunities for the lifelong students especially. Ma'am, the session was very informative and we are greatly inspired by your talk, ma'am. Thank you. Now, I request our Principal ma'am, Dr. Anuradha M. ma'am, to kindly present a moment as a token of our love, respect, and gratitude to Dr. Sudha Rao ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Sudha Rao ma'am, for accepting our invitation and delivering us an effective talk, especially on the occasion of Women's Day, which is required at this occasion. Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Yeah, please gather for a group photo. Faculties, yeah. I request all the faculty members to come and gather for a group photo.
Madam.
just have to very simple.